Hey guys, it's Mash again, here for another video that I wanted to go in a slightly different direction from what we normally do, and that is to talk a little bit about anime. And when it comes to anime, you don't need anyone to tell you that I'm a huge Initial D fan, as evidenced by all of the Initial D stuff that I have. So when I found out that there was an MF Ghost anime that they were going to be making, of course I was interested. Now, what is MF Ghost, you might ask? What does that have to do with Initial D? In simplest terms, MF Ghost is a sequel to Initial D. After the time when Initial D had finished airing and there really wasn't as much Initial D content coming out, we eventually got a manga series called MF Ghost that continues the story. And it takes an interesting direction, but, well, now we get a full anime series of it. Now, I didn't want my Initial D fan goggles to go and influence my entire opinion about that show, but it's not even that. I'm gonna get into that in a little bit, but first I also have to mention that not only were we getting an MF Ghost anime, but there was another racing anime coming out at almost near the same time. Now, Overtake is an entirely new project. According to the Wikipedia, there isn't a previous anime or video game or anything. It's just wholly unique. And because of that, let's take a look at what Wikipedia has to say about Overtake. So Wikipedia says it was created by the Kadokawa Corporation and Troika. It was directed by Ei Aoki, who was the anime director for Fate Zero, and it was produced by Sayaka Ueda. So I have very little familiarity with the people that made Overtake, but you know me, I enjoy racing, and the second that you told me that there was another racing anime coming out, I was gonna watch both. Now that I finished both, I of course wanted to talk about it because I have tons of opinions to get into. But first, I just want to quickly disclaimer here that I'm gonna try to stay away from spoilers. I will give a couple of plot points away. Maybe there's some things that I will detail about the show, but I'm going to try to keep this video as spoiler free as possible in case anyone at home wants to go and watch these after they watch the video. MF Ghost is a series that takes Initial D's universe and slaps 40 or so years on it. No more combustion engines, people don't drive cars anymore, and for some reason, volcanoes plague Japan and make previously inhabited places not habitable any longer. Despite the global switch to electric cars, a circuit racing series emerges that focuses primarily on outdated gas-powered cars, and it becomes a huge hit. People around the world love it. The way that it's portrayed in the show, I would say that they want MF Ghost to be like a racing series with the popularity of Formula 1, but if it was taking place on mountain trails exclusively. And our protagonist is searching for his missing father. He ventures all the way from England to Japan to find him. Oh, and also his mother died. And he's a prodigy at championship circuit racing. And the way he plans to find his father is to enter MF Ghost, which is taking place in Japan. So a lot of the show hinges on the fact that you're watching because you're an Initial D fan. There are almost immediate cameos and references to the old series, which does technically make this a sequel, although when MF Ghost the manga was originally pitched to me, I heard it wasn't supposed to be canon. I guess now all bets are off. This series, I can tell you, is 100% trying to be the Initial D sequel. At first, I had overall positive feelings about what I had just watched. It wasn't perfect, but hey, it wasn't bad either, and you know, I enjoy any Initial D references. It needs to be said that just by getting a sequel to a series you love, as a fan, you're already connected and have at least a minute sliver morsel of interest in seeing what they did with the story, regardless of how it looks in trailers. For me, media is very personal, so I'll always tune in for a sequel just to see what they do with the plot and the characters. There were a few naysayers online, and overall I couldn't help but feel that the anime adaptation of MF Ghost didn't wow me quite like Initial D seasons 1 through 6 did. It was missing something. There was a... God, what's that thing that's always missing from things? Zero, can you help me out?
Pizzazz?
Yeah, that's it. They just needed some more pizzazz. For one, the pacing was a major issue. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but a problem for me by the end of this first season was that it only really had one race, and that race was stretched over several episodes. It just feels like I'm watching Dragon Ball Z but with cars, and I don't like it. The background art was an issue as well, as pointed out online. I'm not really up to speed with how anime works today, but people were complaining that the backgrounds aren't really anime art, it's just high resolution photos stylized like it was drawn for an anime, and you know, it totally struck me as odd, like as in too realistic. Once you know that this is what they're going for, it's impossible to look at the art in this series the same way again. And I also want to mention that the big important plot point to this show just doesn't feel as fleshed out as it could. A lot of the characters feel incredibly one-dimensional, and despite mentioning how important it is to him, these first 12 episodes barely touch on the plot point of our protagonist that's looking for his missing father. In fact, after the first half of season 1, it feels like that plot point is abandoned entirely in place of endless racing stuff. So now I'm saying that from the point of having already finished MF Ghost and made up my mind about season 1, you know, I don't think it's that special. It doesn't have a whole lot of impact to me. And again, this is coming from someone that this was made for me. But the interesting thing is, that wasn't how I always felt about this show. When I was actually watching it, I really still couldn't take off those fan goggles, and I thought to myself, a lot of the people that are criticizing this are making some valid points. However, it's like not gonna be a fully fleshed out story in just 12 episodes. 12 episodes is barely any time to get any story moving forward. That's what I thought. Like tires warming up on a race car, this story just needs a little bit of time to warm up. Everybody's just gotta be patient. Well, enter Overtake. Boy, am I glad that I watched both of these side by side. It really gave me a strong point of reference for what an anime can be. So Overtake, which is also 1 season and 12 episodes so far, is about open wheel racing. For those of you who don't know, open wheel racing, in the simplest explanation, just means you can see the wheels entirely. You can see the axle and some of the innards too. It's completely uncovered, unlike you would see on a stock car, a drag car, or even cars in the initial D series. Open wheel cars are much lighter and daintier, and they're used in series like Formula 1 or IndyCar. So this show has like a split 2 protagonist situation. One of the protagonists has a faint encounter with the other, who is a photographer that has a deep backstory and suddenly gets sucked into the world of motorsports. The photographer finds his muse in this tenacious young driver just trying to get his first win in a series that's dominated by deep pocket teams. The 12 episodes of this show takes you through the ringer of emotional devastation and triumph that comes with motorsport auto racing, as well as touching on some very real world issues beyond just the race cars. This anime is, at least as far as I'm concerned, at the time of making this video, 2024, the total package. I really didn't see how boring MF Ghost was until I finished watching Overtake. By comparison, Overtake has a way deeper story. The characters' backstories get properly fleshed out, they have tons of emotional scenes, and spend lots of time building what their internal struggles are and how they overcome those struggles. You do lose a bit on the racing side, but this feels more like how an anime should be structured. It's just the right amount of balance of focusing on the racing versus focusing on the plot, and not to mention, they move time forward a lot further than MF Ghost. In what feels like months of in-story time that Overtake covers in its first 12 episodes, MF Ghost probably only got through 1 week. And it really shows because, no pun intended, MF Ghost just can't keep up. One of the key differences to me is that in Overtake there are stakes. They get into phobias and stigmas and the harsh reality of racing in a competitive motorsport without a sponsorship. Racing without a sponsorship is the main conflict, but there are several. Overtake gives you characters to root for. The audience has a reason to want to see those characters overcome their personal obstacles. And you just don't get that with MF Ghost. Or at least not as much, or at least maybe in later seasons we'll see the protagonist struggle more, but at least so far in season 1, it's just not there. In MF Ghost, it feels like what's limiting the protagonist is that his car is slow, but he deliberately chooses to stay with it even though it's slow. But if you take that away, then he's really just a racing god again, just like Takumi from Initial D, because he could destroy the competition if only his car had half the horsepower of the Porsches and Lambos that are always up front. It has a lot of that same stuff that we saw with Initial D, and more so tons of shonen anime that like to have protagonists that never lose. He just wins because he's the protagonist. So in MF Ghost, Kanata is like the Yami or Saitama of racing. Except with Saitama, that's kind of the point of the show. And Yami isn't the real protagonist, and even Takumi in Initial D in the first few seasons struggled a lot to become the perfect driver that he later became. In MF Ghost, our main character has to deliberately sandbag himself because Shijino wants everyone to know that Goku can drive cars. MF Ghost is just trying to have another I'm perfect, I never lose character, and it's really bad for the story. Furthermore, even with one of the episodes being filler, which is a bad look for an anime, Overtake got way more accomplished with their story than MF Ghost did. What MF Ghost, the team behind it, Mr. Shishino himself, may have forgotten is that most people watching an anime or a TV show or a movie, they want a good story that leads to something. It has to move forward, it can't just stall. Overtake Season 1 had a lot of character development in just 12 episodes, and by comparison to the 12 episodes of MF Ghost, Overtake might as well have been a feature film. And that's just sad. MF Ghost Season 1 felt like Initial D Seasons 4 to 6, which were still good in my opinion, but it was just 90% racing and maybe 10% plot. When going in to make MF Ghost, they should have just reflected on this shift and tried to emulate Initial D from Seasons 1 through 3, where they gave us a lot more character growth, versus Seasons 4 to 6, which had considerably less story. I think for as much as I love Initial D, I have to admit it still had a lot of flaws as an anime series, but it's my opinion that Initial D was able to get away with being like this because A, it was just so unique and different for when it came out, and B, it captured a really specific moment in Japanese culture that was equally important over there as it was in other parts of the world. And MF Ghost could have been a really good sequel to Initial D, but it's plagued by bad decisions and squanders its own potential from the start. It reeks of a cash grab just because so much of their direction with the series is banking on the fact that most people watching are supposed to be Initial D fans and get all the references, and then that supersedes the slow pace of the story, not much going on with the plot, lazy art choices with the backgrounds, etc. Meanwhile, there's so much conflict in Overtake. Every episode gives you that tasty anime feeling of, oh, I didn't see that coming, I can't wait to see what happens now. We take breaks from the racing and explore the characters' lives and pasts and ambitions. It really gets to be an emotional series that just so happens to be a racing anime, not, hey, watch these cars race on a mountain, let's go into super detail about car components. Plot? Huh? Plot? Do we need that? MF Ghost is definitely trying to be a car guy's anime. We spend so much time focusing on preparing for races, the specifics of setups, and characters having serious discussions about tire wear. Unlike Overtake, where every scene happens for a reason. Every scene has meaning, it builds on the story, and that just moves the whole thing forward. And just wrapping up this video, that's not to say Overtake is perfect. I think it also has that same background issue. I don't know, I don't watch a lot of anime, so I'm not up to speed on these techniques that they use now, but to me it looks like it might also have that. I just didn't hear people complaining about it. I just can't help but think that they may have used photography, real world photography, to cut corners. Sometimes the dialogue is a little weird. There were a few key moments from my memory where I thought character dialogue could have been rewritten because the way that they wrote it was just awkward or simply didn't serve the story. But at the end of the day, when I compare these two racing anime series that both have 1 season and 12 episodes that aired near enough the same time, I gotta go with Overtake. Let me emphasize one more time. Overtake feels like a full 4-course meal when I compare it to the French fries and ketchup appetizer that MF Ghost was in its 12-episode run. I would even take it a step further and say that Overtake is near perfect, and I don't need any more. I think they really brought us to a nice, neat, and short story from beginning to close. They wrapped up all of the loose ends, and if it never gets a sequel, I'm happy just rewatching this because it was damn good. It's right up there for me with Fooly Cooly or Angel Beats or Golden Boy as far as an anime series that felt like it was kind of short, but also complete. And for all of us MF Ghost fans, we're probably not going to really get to the real meat and potatoes of any important plot points until like seasons 3 or 4. Let's be real. I think one thing, and it is painful to admit but needs to be said, is that the creator of Initial D might have just gotten really lucky. I don't mean to discredit him or his work or the incredibly legendary series that Initial D was, but the combination of different things that he had going for his most important anime creation, committing to fully CG racing anime even though it would blow out their budget, you know, the topic of the drift culture of Japan in the 90s, the cool looking 90s car aesthetics that look really good in an anime form, wacky Eurobeat that brings up the energy for high intensity scenes, the general campiness of the story and the characters, all of these things worked so well together, and MF Ghost might just be an attempt to try to get another strike of lightning neatly contained within a bottle. As much as I want to say I love Initial D, like I mentioned before, there are a lot of aspects to it that aren't so great. And I think we see that with MF Ghost too, an anime that has poorly fleshed out plot and way too much emphasis on racing, and although it worked in Initial D, which for its time was so cutting edge, those flaws could be forgiven, it just doesn't get the pass this time. MF Ghost really should be trying harder. They should be trying to give us great racing, but also a compelling story. Anime audiences today, I would say, expect a little more plot development for a series that's so heavily reliant on just one theme. You know, what I'm trying to say here is that we get a lot of anime series that are very specifically themed. I mean, pick anything. You know, you could have an anime about cooking, you can have an anime about being a pirate. Just pick anything and go with it, right? Well, it doesn't just work like because it's racing, people that like racing and people that like anime will like it because it's an anime. That's not enough by itself to be good. I think anyone that watches anime or has like decent taste in like story, narrative, plot, writing of any kind, even outside of anime, can look at MF Ghost, finish watching it, and feel like, I just watched a bunch of race cars. Where was the story? And to throw it over to Overtake one more time, they got both, and they're both fleshed out. It's got racing, and it's got story as well. The series takes the time to go into some of the technical detail about racing. They explain things like, oh hey, what's slipstream? You know, these different concepts that you would encounter if you already knew what racing was. But it also takes time to show us the real heart and struggle that these characters go through in the world of racing. What it's like to be a race car driver, what it's like to be a photographer. And that's something that we didn't always get with Initial D. And Shigino, the creator of Initial D, you know, I also want to throw in this little aside and mention that I never liked the way that he did subplots for characters. You know, it felt like the subplots for the non-protagonist characters were not really important. They didn't really feel like they were really taken seriously as he was writing them, and it just kind of made me sad. It can't just be the Takumi show, it can't just be the protagonist show. There are all of these other interesting stories that you can tell with some of the other things that are going on in the story. With Initial D, if you start to get too invested into a character, the way they would write it is that something abrupt would happen, or even something like totally embarrassing would happen to the character, and then we just don't talk about that because who cares? We're not interested in the actual stories of these other characters. Just go back and watch another 3-episode long race. Initial D was the Takumi show, and I can already see that with MF Ghost, which is why I'm afraid to get invested. Some of the character lines just aren't written very well, and I think that based on the history of Shishino and the way they did characters in Initial D, and just kind of what I've seen in these first 12 episodes, I think we're in for some bad plot lines with MF Ghost. But anyway, MF Ghost, and to some extent Initial D, is an anime for car guys that want to celebrate car culture, but also want to kind of have that like otaku lifestyle anime representation in there as well. While Overtake is a very well-rounded story, it's a great anime that just so happens to be about racing and photography too, and I can't see any fault in that. And when I gotta put these two head to head, I would highly recommend checking out Overtake. It kind of seems like they're not gonna give us more story, and I'm fine with that. You know, sometimes you don't need more story. that's Overtake. To me, Overtake, if we don't get a 13th episode of it, I'm satisfied. I'm totally down to rewatch it. With MF Ghost, you know, at this point, I'm really just gonna watch it out of morbid curiosity. You know, I am still an Initial D fan. I still want to find out what they do with these stories. Like, we get tons of characters coming back, so I want to know what they're gonna do with it. But I'm gonna be watching, like I said, out of curiosity, not because I've been shown something that gives me reason to be invested in this series. And also, I like to be proven wrong. Maybe we'll get another season and really quickly it'll all unravel. They'll fix a ton of these problems. Maybe they'll listen to the things that some people said online, and it'll be a whole lot better. The pace will pick up, and I'll be like, you know what? New video. MF Ghost, not so bad. Part 2, check it out. I'm glad I watched both though, because it was interesting to get like a dual perspective. It was a very exciting time for me anime-wise. I didn't get any kind of excitement to watch anime over the last few years, so this was pretty cool. And that's gonna do it for this video. We hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, like I said, Overtake, a lot better than MF Ghost as far as first seasons go. You know, we normally don't talk about anime, or at least we don't dedicate an entire video to it. If you got to check out any of these series and you want to share your opinions, do so in the comments. Feel free. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to go check out all of our other content as well. We do plenty of other things besides just anime. We normally do video gaming content, but yeah, maybe we'll do another anime video again. If you watch these series and you have something to say, feel free to let us know in the comments below. I'd be happy to discuss the animes down in the comments. And who knows, maybe we'll get another video like this at some point in the future. But yeah, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next Two Stupid Gamers video.